Yo, what the hell's up? Welcome back to Reviews with Jake, where I just got done watching Lost Girls on Netflix. Horse girls, Lost Girls, apparently I'm just spending this quarantine watching girls on the Netflix. So Lost Girls is the true story about a woman and her two daughters who are seeking justice for their missing other daughter and sister, who happens to be a lady of the night. Because of her occupation of choice, it seems as if the local police department does not really aid in the effort of doing this, much to the dismay of our three protagonists. Now, I'll be honest here, guys, I was really leery about this one for a couple reasons. The first one being, well, it just didn't look good based on the trailer. I mean, granted, this isn't really a type of movie that I enjoy watching. There's been a few that I have, and this one didn't look like one of them. My general vendetta against this type of movie, the true story, unsolved murder mystery kind of a thing, is because you already know going in that there's going to be an incomplete plot, at least in some degree. You're not going to get all the information that you want from it. So being someone that really focuses on stories when I review a movie, I knew going in that this was going to be an uphill battle for me to move past that. And the final concern I had was the events, the very, very messed up events that this movie is based on, have happened relatively recently. So this is a fresh wound. There's a lot of pressure on this film to get it right. And I'll be honest, guys, it didn't. It didn't at all for me. Which is confusing as all hell considering the Sundance Film Festival slap of approval right on the poster. I mean, granted, that isn't always a guarantee that this movie is going to just be great for everyone in every way. I mean, there's no way they can guarantee that, but there's usually at least something there, but I just couldn't find anything. I need to preface by saying that none of my negative feelings that I have toward this movie are meant to belittle, disrespect, or make light of the fact that this really happened, and my heart genuinely goes out to the people that are involved in this horrible, horrible sequence of events. Maybe it was the reality of the terribleness here that caused the selection committee at Sundance, as well as the other reviews that I read who were much more forgiving about this movie than I was, which I can understand because I am not going to enjoy condemning this movie. I don't enjoy condemning any movie, but I do feel an obligation to be completely honest with you. I'm never going to lie about how I feel about a film, even if it's an opinion that's completely different than other people, or you know, Sundance Film Festival, very prestigious festival. I disagree here. That's what it is. I'm an honest person, and I'm never going to stop being that, especially in this venue. The first con I had was the cinematography in this movie. I really didn't like it. They made a lot of really weird decisions with the framing and compositions that I just couldn't wrap my mind around why. Like in The Invisible Man last month, I mean, the compositions that they had there, the use of negative space, they weren't good compositions by any stretch, but they were practical because it was the implication of an invisible presence there. Like, there's a reason why they did this. This movie, I couldn't wrap my mind around the reason why they would do these things outside of it just being different. I also didn't like a lot of the really, really slow rack focuses they did that left large portions of entire shots completely blurry and out of focus. Like, I just felt like this movie behind the camera was trying to be so artsy, but I just wasn't on board with it. Additionally, one of the common positives that I kept reading upon the other reviews, especially Rotten Tomatoes, commended the acting, saying that the performances across this movie saved it in a sense, but I didn't feel that way at all. I don't know if I would say the performances were bad, but I didn't think they were great. Certainly not enough to bring this movie out of the red for me. Like Amy Ryan, who plays the mother in this movie, most people were giving her a pat on the back for her performance, but I didn't think it was that great. I mean, I just thought she just swore a whole bunch, and that doesn't really compensate for showing raw emotion. I, as a filmmaker, have made the mistake of having a character that swears a lot, and that is their way of showing emotion, and it doesn't always work that way. Trust me, I've made that mistake, and it didn't work here either. Now, my final gripe for this film is a big thing that kind of encompasses a whole bunch of the negativity I have toward this movie. I'm trying to consolidate it in a way, and that was the method of delivery that they chose was very indecisive for this movie. Now, let me explain what I mean by that. So you have this one true horrible, horrible, horrible event that you want to make a movie about. Now, the way I see it, you have two ways of achieving that. The first being the traditional narrative story, in which you cast an array of actors who play the real-life people who went through these events. Largely built around the story, the characters, the relationships, really try and get a sense of what it was like to be in these events, so that the audience can fully feel the weight of the situation. The other way is the documentary approach, which is a little more straightforward, I guess. It doesn't feel as fabricated, it just kind of puts the facts out there and lets the weight of the actual situation just kind of speak for itself. They don't get cute, they just show you what happened. Either one of these routes has worked for this type of movie. I mean, there's evidence of it throughout the years in cinema. Yet this film decided to go both routes in its method of telling this story. I'm not at all familiar with the director here, but supposedly she's a great documentary filmmaker, which that shows through in a lot of elements throughout this movie. You have the use of real-life news footage that is used of the actual crime scenes and everything. But the big thing I thought was the fact that they didn't actually cast anyone to play the missing girl, outside of like a few flashbacks where you just see her running around a little bit, but nothing too character building or anything. Instead, they chose to kind of cast her to play herself, in a sense, by using her actual photo across all of the missing persons materials. I guess a sort of way to bleed the real life story in kind of a documentary sense into this fabricated story that they conjured up with actors. Which is a cool little factoid and IMDb trivia piece, but in terms of telling a story, a narrative story, it limits the director to build up the character of our missing girl, because she's never actually physically represented to kind of give her case of a character. We know so little about the person that this movie is kind of based around. You kind of rely on the people that were around her in those relationships, the mom and the daughters, to kind of build up this character, but I didn't think they did. They kind of just throw you into this movie right at the start of it, like, the girl is missing from the very beginning, so there's not really any setup to know the dynamic between all of the daughters, all three of them, the missing one and the ones that are still there, as well as the mother and how they all like each other and relate to each other. There's none of that. They kind of just throw you into the movie and you feel like you're just kind of emotionally playing catch up and trying to learn things while they're letting the plot unfold. Now, I could be wrong here, but I'm pretty sure the first time we actually see a missing persons poster, which had the actual girl that they've been looking for, you don't actually see her face, I don't think, until like a half hour into the movie. So that's like 30 minutes that they spend trying to find this girl, but we, the audience, have never met her or even seen her face, so it's hard for us to really get emotionally invested. It's just, we know someone's missing, but we have no idea who, really. For the traditional narrative approach, you need to build up these characters and their relationships to feel the emotional weight of the situation. You don't need to do that with a documentary film, but they went the route of the traditional, at least some sort, and I just didn't feel like it landed. It tried to go both routes at once, and I feel like as a result, in the end, it fell flat. Speaking of the end, I'm not going to get into specifics because that's spoiler territory if you're not familiar with the real story that this is based on, but there's a whole nother thing that happens in the end that is a whole nother can of worms, a whole nother beast to explore, and they just kind of throw it in at the end as kind of an afterthought. Like, the movie goes through its whole motion and everything, and at the end they're just like, oh, by the way, this happens. And you as the audience are like, come again? There was really nothing throughout this entire runtime that I felt like was leading to what they give you at the very end as the cherry on top. It'd be like if someone saw Fellowship of the Ring and the Two Towers but never saw Return of the King and is asking someone who has seen all three to be like, hey, what happens in the end in Return of the King? You could tell that person and be like, well, Frodo gets up to Mount Doom, he kind of has the internal dilemma, kind of like Isildur did, but he ultimately goes through with it. And that person that only saw the first two would be like, yeah, I could see that happening. There were signs throughout the first two movies. I'm not shocked to hear that they did that in the third. Comparing it to this movie and what they did, it'd be like, oh, Boromir comes in at the very end, steals the ring from Frodo, goes and opens up a timeshare. And that person would be like, wait, Boromir? The guy who got like 40 arrows in him? In the first movie? If you look at it from A to Z, but you've only seen in the movie A through S, then you learn what happens at Z. You're like, well, A through S didn't really make me believe that that was going to happen at all. And I didn't feel like at the end of this movie I knew these characters at all, especially if this happened at the end. This isn't supposed to be like a Saw Shyamalan ending here. Like, this is based on real life stuff, so getting it factually correct is important. This movie had a lot of great intent, especially about showing us who I didn't know about the events that happened in this movie until I watched it, which is good because we the people should know that messed up stuff like this happens in the world, but the method of delivery, the package it was given, I did not like, and that is important. I'm going to give Lost Girls a D. I don't know what else to say about it. I mean, I don't think I've ever seen a movie and reviewed one that I am way over here and they're way over here. Like, granted, no one over here loved the movie, but I just don't see any merit out of it, which sucks because this story, the real life events, it deserves so much better than this. Obviously, every movie I watch, I want to like, but this one really hurts that I didn't. I'll be honest. But that's just me. What do you guys think? Let me know if you agree or disagree in the comments below. And make sure you're subscribed to this channel to stay up to date on new reviews coming real soon. Stay safe and thanks for checking in.